So, I've been playing a lot of Rapier Greatsword lately, and I've got some footage together. I thought I'd put together a build video to share with you guys what I've been up to. This build is so much fun. It's a full melee build in light armor, so inherently it has that weakness against a ranged opponent because we cannot fight at a distance, but we make up for that with that incredible mobility of the build, both Rapier and Greatsword having great utility as well. And the end result is a very fast and flashy light armor build. This thing is so much fun to play, and it looks fun to play. I think that's one of maybe my favorite parts, is that this build just has so much style to it, and that's not even including the cannon ultimate. So I've got a written guide on my website, pvpnewworld.com. There's a link down below if you guys want to check that out. And I've got a whole bunch of gameplay commentary at the end of this video for you guys too. If you guys like the video and the build, feel free to leave a comment or even hit that like button. It helps me out a ton if you do. And without further ado, let's take a look at that build. So, starting off, this is a Dexterity build. Both Rapier and Greatsword scaling primarily from Dexterity. I guess Greatsword scales equally from Dex and Strength. But I've put the 50 points in Strength and Intelligence. The 50 in Strength for a full melee build is fantastic. Even Rapier will benefit a lot from this. 10% additional damage to your light and heavy attacks, and Rapier does a huge amount of damage with its light attacks, so this is a very nice perk to have in general, I think, for a melee build. And then, of course, Greatsword's going to get some nice additional damage from those first 50 points of strength scaling, too. 50 in Intel for that additional critical damage, not to mention the bonus damage that Rapier will get from this. You could dump all your points in Dexterity for this build if you want, or just do 50 Strength and the rest in Dex. It's kind of up to you. I like going for the 50 Intel because I do favor the Rapier as my burst weapon. But if you find you're using Greatsword a little bit more and Rapier more defensively on this guy, more Dexterity might be the way to go. And then Dexterity. If I had a fully max build, I could have 270 Dexterity on this build. I'm on my Iron Man, so I don't have the best in slot or perfect gear. But 246 is not bad. Ideally, getting 250 for that bonus critical damage would be nice too. And then 150 Constitution, a must-have for light armor brawler. Critical damage reduction is huge in PvP. And you could even go to 200 or even more Constitution if you want on this build. You're not going to lose that much damage if you want to go for the additional bulk here, so it's definitely up to the user. I'd recommend playing around with it and see what you like best. Now, taking a look at the gear, for the Rapier, I've got Officer's Ceremony. This is the best Rapier that I have on this account, but this is not the best in slot Rapier for this build. The best in slot perk that I have here is Penetrating Backstab. Really good in PvP. It does just a little bit less backstab damage against a squishy opponent, but a lot more backstab damage against someone who has quite a bit of armor on. So I do prefer this because you want that additional damage against those tankier foes more than anything. Vicious, Keenly Empowered, great just outward damage perks, but I would prefer to have an Attunement perk and Keenly Jagged here instead. The big reason for that is because Rapier will return a ton of stamina from the attunement hitting and the dots on the Keenly Jagged, so that just plays into the sustain of this build. And that's why I say this Rapier here is fantastic. It has really good damage, but it does not offer the sustain that a best in slot Rapier would. And then for the Greatsword, I've got the Fighter's Blade, Relentless Freedom, Enchanted, and Plague Crits. Again, I'm on my Iron Man, so this is the best item I could get for the build right now. Ideally, instead of Enchanted, I would like to have Trenchant Strikes for that almost 20% additional heavy attack damage. Greatsword is the heavy attack king, so that is basically the best damage perk if you're going to be swinging heavies on a Greatsword. Relentless Freedom is a nice perk to have for Greatsword that I would highly recommend on any Greatsword build that's using the Gap Closer. That being said, it's not a fantastic perk to have on your Greatsword itself. Now, because of my gear limitations, I don't have any gear that even has a Relentless Freedom perk, so this was the only way that I could get this perk on my Greatsword bar, basically, is by farming a Greatsword that already had it. But I would actually prefer the Energizing Counter instead of Relentless Freedom here. That Stamina Sustain is a huge deal for Greatsword. And then Plagued Crits, I mean, it's not a terrible perk, but again, the ideal perk here would be Attunement. Especially nice on Greatsword because it has such high base weapon damage, and that's what the Attunement perk will scale from. Now, for the gems on my weapons, the Greatsword has Gambit on it. This is totally fine. If you wanted, you could put a Rune Glass gem on here with the Rune Glass gem effect of your choice. I like things like the additional stamina recovery, especially for Greatsword, is very nice. Or you could go for the dot or pretty much whatever rune glass gem you're looking for. But Gambit is definitely the base gem that you want, because those Greatsword heavies are going to cost you stamina, so you will almost always not have full stamina when you're swinging those heavies, so you get really good uptime out of that. And then on the Rapier, I have Gambit. This is because I don't have access to making new rune glass gems on my Iron Man at the moment. It's something I'm working towards. When I can, I will be replacing that with the Aberreal empowered rune glass gem that I have here. This is Arcane with the poison dot on it, which deals nature damage. Any of the dots work. I know that nature damage is usually preferred because people don't build against it, but the whole point is that we have part of the damage converted into some kind of magical damage, which does usually more damage against tanky opponents, and then we get that dot on the end of it. Not only is that great for damage, but again, it plays into that sustain that Rapier gets. Each tick of this dot will give you 3 stamina back, and anything that you hit will have this dot applied to it. A very, very good gem for Rapier. Definitely best in slot for something like PvP, the mix of damage and sustain that it gives. Now, let's take a look at the gear. I did mention that Calamity Counter and the Freedom Rush are some perks that you want on your gear or your weapon if you can get them. For the Rapier, I would actually love to have the Omnidirectional Evade. Outside of that, I don't think any of the weapon perks are a huge deal on my gear. And as you can see, I've really favored Freedom and, of course, Resilient on all of my pieces. 3 pieces of Freedom with Resilient, and then I've got the Resilient Shirking Energy legs, and I've got some Shirking Heels Refreshing Resilient boots. Yeah, in PvP, Freedom is really nice. That's definitely why I've preferred that perk. I think things like Shirking Fortification or even Shirking Heels are very good secondary perks to have on top of that, but I would prioritize the Freedom myself over the other perks. And then for the jewelry, I've got the Champion's Amulet, Champion's Ring, and then just a Conscript's Earring. Champion's Amulet and Champion's Ring. These are arguably best in slot for so many different PvP builds. You get them from the PvP reward tracks, so they can take a bit of farming to get, but they're one of the more common drops, so after a bit of that reward tracking, you should get access to these. Very, very good. Health, Shirking and Power, Stamina Recovery, great for our sustain, great for that max health, which does increase the healing as well because that will scale from your max health. And then, of course, that empowers. So much damage coming from that on a roly build like this. Champion's Ring, Hardy, Keen Awareness, Invigorated Punishment, fantastic stuff. There are a lot of good rings that came with the Brimstone patch that you could use here instead if you prefer something like that. And then, of course, the Conscript's Earring. The ideal third perk here would be something like Regenerating, but Healthy Toast and Refreshing Toast are the 2 best healing perks for an earring in the game. You definitely want these. So yeah, I don't have it on the Iron Man quite yet, but at least I have the 2 good perks here. And then for the potions, of course, you want to have the Infused Health, you want to have Regen, you want to have the Mana Potions to get that additional healing from that Healthy Toast as well. And last but not least, you want to have a consumable that gives you a little bit more additional max stats so that you can push better stats on this build. Honing Stones definitely don't hurt. I don't have any in my bag, but I do try to use them on the Iron Man when I can as well. And if you are living that baller life, you can always run something like the Oak Flesh Bomb here as well. And then for the ultimate, the cannon. You could really run any ultimate you want here. I think a lot of them would have good synergy with this build. Things like Vines would work really well. The Detonate would work really well as well, but I like the cannon. I'm kind of limited to just using this Heart Rune at the moment because I've locked myself out of dungeons on this account. So I've been playing around a lot with it. It hits very hard. I'm excited to have the dot on the end of it and even try out the AoE morph of it to give me kind of a finisher if someone gets out of my melee range. I kind of like having that option on a full melee build. There are a couple clips that I'll share with you guys where I did catch people completely off guard with the cannon, and I think that's part of why I liked it so much on this build. But yeah, really just go for the ultimate of your choice here. And then for the weapon masteries, let's start off with the Rapier tree. The important passive, of course, Controlled Breathing, 3 stamina on any hit. If you have that best in slot Rapier, you are getting a ton of stamina back every single time you hit something. So very, very powerful perk for the Rapier. And then, of course, the Refreshing Strikes to give you even more sustain on all of those dots and stuff, too. I've gone with a Grace build for the most part, fully investing in Evade and investing in Flesh as well. But instead of going for Riposte, I decided to go for Flourish and Finish. On the full melee build, the additional reach from Flourish and Finish is really nice. You'll see in the gameplay it helps me close a lot of kills and is a very good defensive skill as well. Riposte is fantastic, but man, it is not working properly this patch. I'm finding it bugs out more than half the time, so yeah. I do like this change, not just because Riposte is broken, but this is actually a really good skill for this build. You only have to invest the first 3 points in the Flourish and Finish because we're not applying any dots with Tondo, so we don't really benefit from the last 2 perks at all here. So there you go. Taking a look at the Greatsword tree. Gone for the standard Greatsword tree I was running before, but I've made a little bit of changes to it since my Greatsword hatchet setup. Relentless Rush, Steadfast Strike, and of course Calamity Counter. And I've built heavily into the Defiance tree so that I could get the additional healing from this. Greatsword heals quite a lot. It's a pretty beefy healing weapon, so I like this combo a lot for it. My favorite thing about this setup is that you can do a really good job controlling your stances with guarded shift as well as aggressive shift. I'm not very good at using block on Greatsword, but it's something I'm learning a lot more about. And I'm quite enjoying being able to force the Defiance stance so that you can just be bulkier while you have your Greatsword out and you're setting up the rest of your combos. Of course, arrow deflection is really nice. If you haven't tried Greatsword with arrow deflection, it's a very good way to just deal with bows. Bows do a ton of damage. You can just hold block and slowly walk to cover, and it takes them a long time to chew through your stam bar. So yeah, quite a fantastic passive. Doesn't just block arrows, will block magical attacks as well. And then of course, I've favored the stamina sustain passives that I can get on Greatsword. Step and Strike, really fantastic. So is Faultless Defender if you're using that block effectively. And last but not least, that critical comeback for that healing and stamina return that it gives. Yeah, quite enjoy this setup for Greatsword. Great mix of offense and defense. All right, let's jump into that PvP commentary. First fight here in Outpost Rush. I'm getting chased by a bunch of enemy players. They're putting some good damage in. I go for the direction change behind them as I fall off the edge with that roll and then go back through them. The Flourish and Finish around the corner, not only for that stagger, but the end poke is going to give me a little bit of stam back, and it gets me what I need in order to just quickly roll out of there. And then as I go around the corner here, I charge up that heavy. I end up hitting the Calamity Counter a little early there, but a nice stagger with my Greatsword and a huge amount of damage coming in from a friendly bow player there. And I did some good AoE, and he just put in the finishing touch to those guys. And now I'm just going to do my best to try to hold in here as he shoots at the doorway. Really nice that he's here because the archers aren't going to be focusing me the whole time. Go for the Flourish and Finish, get good damage into that guy. There's a nice connection with the Greatsword Gap Closer into the Steadfast Strike. The stagger brings him down, and I just keep the pressure up on this guy. A little bit of whipping around him with the flesh into the backstab poke. And then I go back out the door here. Do get the interrupt on this guy, but he seems pretty bulky, so I just turn to focus on the archer here. Really good damage on him. The light attack into the Calamity Counter, and I just shoot out the Calamity Counter right away to get the kind of end damage on the end of that light attack. You can get a pretty quick cancel with that. And then the enemy players, after we killed so many, the rest go back outside, and the reinforcements come back. Again, through the doorway, I go for the Calamity Counter, get a nice stagger there, go with the flesh through everybody, but I miss the first shot of the Flourish and Finish, bust out the cannon for a little bit more damage, huge damage on those guys with the Gap Closer as well, and then I make the fatal mistake of gassing myself out of stamina. Calamity Counter coming in really clutch though. I managed to get a good amount of resource back with that, but yeah, eventually just swarmed by the enemy players. But I think that clip shows a really good example of this build against a variety of different opponents and the pressure that you can kind of sustain on a build like this. So moving on to the next clip here, you guys might remember this fight from the intro clip, but you only saw a very small portion of it. This was a very long fight that yeah, I had against this group here. There you see I was able to down that guy, and then I go for the Calamity Counter into the kind of AoE spread that it has at the end in order to finish him off. The tricky part of this build, of course, is that we don't have any ranged options outside of the cannon, so gotta get a little creative when I can't get too close to the body like that. And yeah, getting a little risky there. This was the first time that I fought these guys. This was my first encounter with them, so I'm just trying to kind of feel this out and taking a few risks for sure. The enemy players being a little patient as well. I think the damage that I put into them definitely scared them a little bit. I get really good damage into this guy swinging the axe. He switches to his hatchet, and I bring him down into the immortal status there. But he quickly is healed up by the healer, and I'm just going to have to kite through the group there with my gap closer. This is an excellent spot for a build like this to fight. The big weakness of this build is having to fight open field against multiple ranged opponents, or even just a single ranged opponent that's very fast. And this kind of terrain here, you can see I can really control my angles so that these guys can only really do damage to me if they're within my danger range as well. And I get really good damage into that guy with the heavy attack, into the gap close on the Greatsword. I try to hit him with the backstab on the flesh. Unfortunately, he goes back into the healing circles. And this is something in this fight that I'm just going to have to stay conscientious of, trying to pull these guys out of the healing circles. I get a nice knockback there and then go for the cannon shot. I think someone in the front ends up eating that cannon shot. But again, really good damage on the player in the back. I try to stay on top of him with that combo. Unfortunately, though, I end up kind of getting tunnel visioned on the healer, and I think I would have had an opportunity to get that kill there, but I kind of screwed it up. And these guys still keep coming towards me. And just the mobility of Rapier Greatsword, I think that's what's giving me the advantage in this fight here, is I'm constantly moving behind and through the group, and it makes it very hard for them to target or stay on top of me. And then again, the Calamity counter into a bit of a knockback. There I get the heavy attack. I try to go for the stagger, but he does have his berserk up, so he is immune to that stagger. And just as the berserk comes down, I hit him with the flourish and finish, bringing him into that immortal status. And again, I bring him down. And then I go for the Calamity counter. He was definitely in range. I think it was just that little bit of height that caused it to miss. It just went over top of him, so I don't manage to get the kill. They do get the res on him. And then right away, I just shift towards the enemy player with the Void Gauntlet there, and just using my space as best I can. This guy kind of coming to the front. He's a little bit lower on health. Managed to get a nice knockback on the Calamity counter. There's the flourish and finish, and he just rolls out of the way in time. And that enemy healer is making this fight very, very hard for me. Putting good damage into these guys. I think you can really see the AoE damage that this build can push out, but the healer is just preventing me from closing off any of these kills, really. And there's the flesh through as the ice shower comes down to stop my combo. Very, very hard to pick and choose these moments. I get a nice shot on that guy with the cannon, but again, they just keep the pressure on me, and I'm forced away. Just chug some more potions, chug the mana pot, and then come back around the corner, try to hit him with this stagger. I keep falling for that trap against his grit while he's in berserk. Go through the group with the gap closer there. You can see I get some decent damage on them. And here I make the fatal mistake of going in with my stam low like that. And they put so much damage into me so quickly. Yeah, this build is not insanely tanky, so you gotta do your best, I think, with a setup like this to be stunning, staggering, and avoiding incoming damage from enemy attacks. Either way, I come back out for another round against these guys. They're all just kind of standing around there, and I attack them. And I think I did good in the last fight against them, but I need to be a little bit smarter with my target selection. The healer is definitely someone I should be shooting at here. Really nice flesh backstab on the hatchet player there, doing over 5k damage to him. And I kind of get stuck with the root right away into the Calamity counter just to stall that out and knock them back. And then try to put a bit of pressure into the Void Gauntlet player. I think what I really need to do is target the healer. A nice flesh again into the backstab. That guy takes quite a lot of damage. Then I go for the gap close through, and he is already healing up from the healer. And this is where I make the right choice, target shifting onto the healer, and I'm going to do my best to stay on top of him. He rolls twice, blows his stamina, and that is going to give me a big opportunity to stay on top of him and keep my damage on. Unfortunately, I end up rolling away, just trying to avoid the pressure from the other players. But the healer finding himself off to the side here, he's whipping out the light attacks. He's got to get a heal on himself. And then I just quickly hit him with a swipe on the light attack. The flesh through to finish the down body. Fantastic backstab damage. Oh my god, another flesh. So much damage on it again. And I just managed to connect the Calamity counter at the end. Bring the hatchet player down. And then the steadfast strike stagger. Another player goes down. And just like that, one opponent left, and I just start feeding him the damage. Definitely a very exciting and difficult fight for me, even though these guys maybe weren't the most experienced PvP players. Moving on to the next clip, there is the cannon coming in clutch. I told you that people don't expect it. Well, that archer wasn't even looking at me. One cannon to bring him down. And I had to include the one-shot clip there just to show you guys a little bit more damage. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Again, if you want to see that written guide, you can find it on my website, pvpnewworld.com. There's a link to it down below as well. You can catch me live on Twitch. There's a link for that too. And of course, if you have some clips that you want to see in the New World Top 5 fights, you can send that to Kristofer at pvpnewworld.com. A quick shout out to our sponsor, ExpressVPN. If you sign up with the link down below, you can get a deal on your first few months. And last but certainly not least, thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon for supporting the show. Thank you everybody just for tuning in and watching. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Hope to see you all again, and have a great night, everybody.